Tori. I am the product lead for the Niantic map, which includes our visual positioning system, or VPS, that we're going to be talking about today. I've been working at Niantic for a little bit over 3 years, so I'm really excited to talk a little bit about how you can use VPS to build really cool, immersive AR experiences.
Awesome. Thank you. And Joe?
Hello, friends. Good to see some familiar names and faces and some new ones as well. I've been at Niantic for about 2 years now as our developer relations lead. And what this means is I get to kind of work day in and day out with teams that are working on different productions, kind of like core to their business. A lot of them are games studios using VPS. A lot of them are agencies or creative houses using VPS in some way for their clients. And so I've just been really fortunate to see a lot of different use cases, see how it works, see some ways and challenges, and hope to share some like practical tips and some inspiration today, sharing some different samples and examples of VPS in action. Thanks for coming out, everybody. There's a lot of things you could be doing right now, so I just feel really grateful to have you here.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Joe. All righty. So now let's go ahead and pass it over to Tori for a quick overview of VPS.
Awesome. Thanks, Pablo. Cool. So I'll talk a little bit about what VPS is. While this video might not play, it's fine. Oh, there it goes. Okay, great. So our mission at Niantic is to inspire people to explore the world together. So if you've played any of our games, you can see that they often implore you to go out and visit areas in your community. And what we've done with VPS is we've created an entire tool chain that allows you to build experiences that are persistent. And when we say persistent, we mean that it is an experience that is there, that remembers how it changes, that stays up to date over time, and is really attached to a location. So there's a lot of experiences that exist today that are sort of ephemeral, like you put on a headset, for example, and you like play around in a virtual reality experience and you turn it off. When you turn it back on again, it's sort of like back to a new experience every single time. What we're really seeking to do with VPS is create sort of a mirror world on top of the physical world and really connect, we say connect atoms to bits, basically enable you to sort of the essence of augmented reality is being able to take the physical world and build on top of that in a way that's really rich and contextual, and then also be able to share that with different people. And what I'll be talking about for the next 10 minutes or so is the tools that we have at your disposal to build on top of the physical world in any place that's interesting and meaningful to you. So Paul, we can jump to the next slide. So what you're able to do with our tool chain is explore 3D meshes of real world locations that are near you or in other places. One of the really important advancements that we have is you no longer have to physically be standing at that location to be able to author content there. You'll eventually want to go there to use the experience, but we're building all sorts of tools that make it really easy to interact and iterate without having to run outside to that location every single time. One thing that's really special about what we provide here at Niantic is the experiences are like super precise. So we're not focused, at least not yet, on building like a map of like an entire city, but it's more specific locations that are very rich, all the way down to being able to see like at centimeter level detail where your content is going to be. One question we get asked a lot is like, how large of an area can I work with? I'm excited to share that we've made some pretty big improvements on that since we launched about 2 years ago. I think right now you can typically build things that are like 20 by 20 or 30 by 30 meters in size. So that's like close to 1,000 square meters of sort of play space, and still have that like centimeters of detail, which is really exciting. I'm also going to be talking today about being able to build your experiences both with our Lightship on ARDK, as well as for the web with Eighth Wall. And the same underlying map and scanning technology that we'll be talking about power both of those experiences. So it's really up to you whether you want to build something that is very broad, so like really easy to just jump into with a URL, that's for like the web, or if you want to build something that's very deep, which would actually require like downloading a Unity app. and building in Unity. So really think about, like, am I looking for an experience that has a lot of breadth or an experience that has a lot of depth? We can answer questions about that in the Q&A as well. We can jump to the next slide, Pablo. So one of the most important things to think about when building a VPS experience is the where. And once you decide what you want to build, you need to think about what type of location or what types of locations do I want this experience to work. There's a lot of different motifs that folks use when building. Two basic things to think about is, am I building an experience that I want to be really rich at one specific location? Or am I building kind of a template experience that I want to be available at a whole bunch of different locations? So for the former, we've seen a lot of folks build like art installations that are in augmented reality that are overlaid on top of their favorite landmark, is one thing that people do. If you're thinking about multiple locations, we've seen a lot of people build things that are like scavenger hunts, where you can send people on like a little like sort of mystery like adventure throughout the city and have VPS experiences at a series of locations. But for any experience that you build, sort of the first step is to choose the location or locations where you want that experience to work. And the way that you can do that really easily is with either the geospatial browser, which is shown over here on the left, and the Wayfair app, which is shown over here on the right. Both of these tools are for both iOS and for Android, and they're for both web and Unity-based development. So you're able to explore the map. You can just type in the search bar and actually look at the hundreds of thousands of locations that already exist and are already VPS activated where you can build content. We can jump to the next slide. One really important thing to call out is you're not just constrained to locations that are already on our map. You can also add new public locations anywhere you want. So the way you do that, I recommend using the geospatial browser. The interface is just a little bit easier, but you basically can scroll over to any place in the world. What I'm showing here on the left is you can just go in here, click on the location that you want to add, and then this takes you through a nomination workflow where you just enter in a title, a description, you put in a picture, and then within 5 minutes, that's on the map, and you'll be ready for scanning and activation if you want to start building the experience there publicly. We can jump to the next slide. So once that location is created, you can start working with it right away. I do want to spend just a minute sort of explaining what waste spots are. So you'll see the term waste spot show up a lot in our documentation. Waste spots are really conducive to our mission of inspiring people to explore the world together. And if you've played any of our games, all the locations that show up in Pokemon Go and Ingress, in Monster Hunter Now, all of those locations are waste spots that are then used as a set of locations that are served in our games. It's really important to understand that like all waste spots are public locations that we certify, or that our community has said like, hey, these are safe locations, these are good for exploration, they're good for exercise, they're good for social interaction. That does not mean that you can only build VPS experiences at waste spots. So when you create location, you'll see that it says create public location. That means that you're saying like, hey, this location is publicly accessible and it's safe. And if you create a public location, it's possible that it'll eventually become a waste spot. But I just want to make it clear to our developers that you don't need to like sit around and wait for us to like vote on the location that you add to the map before you can start building on it. You can start building on it right away. There was a time when we only allowed developers to build location or build experiences at waste spots, but that's, I think, added way too much friction to the developer experience. So we've removed that restriction, and you can add public locations anywhere you want as long as they are safe and publicly accessible. So just don't put locations like in like prisons or in the middle of the ocean or in volcanoes, but like use your best judgment and have fun with it. So that's just a quick disclaimer about what waste spots are, and you'll still see the term waste spot show up a lot in our documentation. One other thing to keep in mind is we also still, if you're developing, like let's say I'm developing and I'm working from home and I want to develop an experience really quickly, that doesn't mean that you have to create a public location in your home in order to do testing. We still have an entire workflow that we call creating test scans, where you could, for example, just create a test scan of your couch that's right next to you, and then just rapidly iterate using your couch. And if you do that, that doesn't mean that your couch then shows up on the map and other developers see your couch. So there's still an entire supported workflow for creating a test scan and then building on top of that. What I'm talking about here with wayspots and public locations are like, these are locations that are out in the world that are publicly accessible, and these are locations where you want to send your users to use your application. But can certainly answer any more questions about that in the Q&A section. We can move on to the next slide, Pablo. Okay, scanning locations. So what I'm sort of doing now is walking through the end-to-end process that you need to go through to build a persistent AR experience with VPS. So what we talked about so far are choosing an existing location. You can also add a new location. When you do that, you will need to use our scanning app, which is called the Wayfarer app, which works for both iOS and Android. Same app is used for both web development as well as Lightship development. And when you select a location, you'll be able to enter the scanning flow and submit scans for that location. Our requirement for a location to be available for VPS is there need to be at least a total of 10 scans that are uploaded to that location. Each scan needs to be at least 20 seconds long. And we also have a requirement that the difference in time between the oldest scan and the newest scan needs to be at least 5 hours. I know these requirements can sound like kind of onerous. The reason we have that constraint, or that requirement, I should say, is when we are building these maps, we want these maps to be robust enough that your users can engage with the experience and be able to localize safely and successfully at different times of day. So for example, if I've only scanned the location once and it was like a sunny morning, that location is going to look very different on a cloudy evening. So having that requirement that there's some time difference between the newest scan and the oldest scan at that location, make sure that we build the highest quality map for you so that your users have the best possible experience. We're still working on ways of making it easier and making it even easier, I should say, to meet the requirements for robust and really rich maps that are easy to localize to. That is still a constraint that exists now. I just wanted to explain a little bit of why we have that constraint. Okay, we can jump to the next slide. So as I mentioned, the requirement is you need to have at least 10 scans that meet the quality criteria. When you select a location, either in the Wayfarer app or in the geospatial browser, if this location meets the requirements to be activated, you'll see an activation button that pops up. So you'll be able to select the location, just hit yes, activate. And then usually that process runs in less than 2 hours. So what's happening is we take all the scans and process them and build all the maps and all the meshes that are necessary for VPS development. And then a location will be available for localization with the VPS service. Separately, if you're doing like just prototyping and development with a test scan, that still only requires one scan, and that is typically processed even faster. So like less than an hour typically. So just keep in mind that's a totally separate process. What I'm talking about here is activating public locations. We can jump to the next slide. Cool. So content authoring is once you have selected the location that you want to use, you can select that location, whether you're building on the web or building in with Lightship or Unity. The example that's shown here is building with 8th Wall, but you'll be able to download the mesh that you want to author your content to and actually sort of use that as your almost like a scaffold upon which you can drop in your content and see things relative to the real world. My recommendation when you're doing this is there's definitely no substitute for going to a location in real life, but the meshes make it a lot easier to sort of preview what that experience is going to look like. And there's a lot of really great tools like Blender, for example, that allow you to build the effects that you need. Cool. I think we can go to the next slide. Oh, one other thing to call out. So if you have played any of our games, you'll notice there's one sort of common theme in Niantic games like Ingress, Pokemon Go, Pikmin Bloom, Monster Hunter Now, is the sort of the hero view is your character standing on a map of wherever you are, sort of like walking around like a big giant. And this is a really helpful way to sort of orient yourself and understand where you are in the world. So what we've done is we've actually modularized this and created what we call the Maps module or the Maps SDK. Again, this is for both Lightship and for web. And you are able to create sort of like this connective tissue that connects all the different locations in your game. So if you're building a scavenger hunt, for example, you can come up with your own styling that then allows you to render all the different locations that are part of your experience and make it easier for your users to understand where they are in the world and where they need to go to interact with different content. So this works in concert with VPS and just uses the GPS signal on your phone to tell you where you are and put your character on a map so you can orient yourself. And there's a bunch more documentation on this available as well if you want to integrate this as part of what you build. I think that's my last slide, but oh, right, there's still this. So this is just a little bit of inspiration to talk about like why we're so excited about taking all the tools that we use to build the games that we have here at Niantic and affording these to our developers to build with us. Is the dream here is to really create a flywheel where the experiences that we make and the experiences that our developer community build get more player engagement, which gets more people out in the world interacting with the content and creates more virtuous cycles of interacting with content, iterating on that content, making it better, and building that map up over time. As we have more and more people that are able to see the fruits of their labor in terms of interacting with AR content, that's going to allow us to build bigger and fresher maps. We have some really exciting announcements coming up over the next couple months about how we're building more tools that are like more focused on just mapping for the sake of mapping that I'm very excited about personally as a map nerd. But as participants in this ecosystem, you're absolutely like helping us forge the path. So very, very grateful for all of you being here. And thank you so much, like giant +1 to everything Joe said about how important it is to us to have engaged developers that we can learn from. And I think I'm actually done now with my section, Pablo.
You are, yes. Thank you so much, Tori, for all that great info. We had a couple questions come in during in the chat. I think, Joe, you were doing a great job of answering a few of those. And then we have some in the Q&A. We will address all the Q&A questions shortly after these next few slides. Joe, over to you.
Boom. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Tori, for the lead up to that. Real quick, Pablo, I tossed a fresh slide in there. Not sure if you're able to stop sharing and refresh, but it'll be worth it. Promise. If we can do that. Thank you. Okay, go to the next slide real quick. So I think press play and then hit mute on that one. But this was kind of the aha moment of VPS for me. At this point, I had been working at Niantic for about a year. And then this team called JR Reality was about ready to launch their app. So I went out to Brooklyn area for the launch. They had an artist named JR come out to kind of help with the public showcase. And there was like 60 people there in person. And we walked from this garden area out to this VPS location. And I got to watch as like 60 people were simultaneously scanning, localizing to this VPS way spot. And then they saw those picture frames all pop up in front of them. And there were kind of, at first there were placeholder images. Play that one more time, Pablo. At first there were placeholder images that were there of other people's faces that we had kind of seeded in advance. But then one by one, each guest started like recording their own little video and taking their own selfie. And then you saw as kind of people you saw in person there, their faces and portraits were kind of instantly, brought into this VPS way spot. And this was just like a big aha moment for me because this kind of showcased, I think, the powerful nature of what VPS can do. And that is like, it can be social, it can be persistent, it can be like a very human experience in a way that most digital products can't get to. It felt, I had this sense of like a tangible nature of a thing through this VPS experience. And so for me, there was just this light bulb moment that went off. And I wanted to share that with you because it took me a while to get there. I'd seen a bunch of examples of VPS before, but it took a minute for it to click. And I hope today, going through some of these slides, I'm going to share a bunch of samples with you that can hopefully inspire you in a way, during this challenge. Okay, next slide, Pablo. So the first thing I want to mention is a lot of these slides, these are like live business use cases of VPS. I think there's a big difference between like a demo showcasing VPS in a unique way versus like having it in action, especially for the challenge. The challenge being a shorter period of time, I do want to share that like these are production ready VPS experiences. You're going to have a much shorter period of time. So obviously as judges, we're going to look at this through this kind of challenge lens of, what can we do in a month? You can do it a lot in a month. But here's kind of like some use cases with business cases attached to them to see kind of practically how can VPS be used in a powerful way that people are also like paying developers to build these things for. So hopefully that's valuable to you too. All right, this first one's this cool group called Just Makes Sense, and their app's called Centivizer. And what they really wanted to do was get out to kind of retail locations. They went to this Tanger outlet in like Tennessee, and they had this like semi-truck setup. See that box on the top left? Each of those walls and like hinged out, and it created this kind of like practical set down there on the bottom left. And it looked like this Indiana Jones kind of like treasure hunt setting. And what was cool is that once you went in there, this was kind of placed as a temporary VPS location that they had stood up for about 2 weeks, scan, localize, and then as you were kind of walking about the retail space it was like a step tracker. And as you collected steps, then you would go back and relocalize to this VPS location, and you would open up this little chest, and then it would give you like actual discounts or swag or some kind of like gift from different retailers that they had partnered with for this short-term activation. We'd never really seen VPS used in that way. And so it was kind of cool seeing this like combination of practical set design plus like VPS plus commerce and retail. And yeah, it was a pretty cool project. All right, next slide. Kinfolk. Okay, these are a great team out of Manhattan. And they Kinfolk, I'm just going to read this. They curate monuments as pieces of art dedicated to Black, Brown, Indigenous, LGBTQ history that everyone should know. And they're really great at it. They're really great at partnering with local organizations to kind of highlight these stories, these monuments, individuals, and events that are kind of like overlooked often when it comes to local history. And so for this one, I wanted to show you this one in particular, this fro pick, because they're using a combination of VPS plus semantic segmentation to get this one to feel really, really nice. And so I want to encourage you kind of during this challenge, like VPS is there as a feature, but think also, how can this pair nicely, with other Lightship features that are there to make it an engaging experience, unique, and for it to feel kind of, more interactive, depending on the environment in particular. This fro pick could have appeared anywhere, right? But they had it show up right in the middle of this body of water, and it fits the location for what they're trying to do there. What you don't see right there on the ground below that little plinth, that little green stamp, it's kind of this like vinyl image target that they use with additional information on, like, come learn about Kinfolk for people that are haven't already downloaded the app. Next one, Pablo. Oh, and you mentioned, I didn't see that in the chat, but Kinfolk's team will be joining for the AR Voices event later this month. I highly recommend attending that too, to kind of get to know the devs, but also learn more about like their business model, how they like to approach development. How do they even get funding for stuff like this? They'll be talking about that in the event. All right, this third one's cool. This is by Air Cards. Two can play at that game. I wanted to show this one because there's not many, I would say, multi-user VPS experiences that I've seen. Often they're like single user, single player, for simplicity's sake sometimes. But this one was used as a demo by Air Cards that they could then share with clients to show how VPS can be used with multiplayer support. So the VPS location here, you can see on that tree, that palm tree is used as part of the VPS mesh. So that little box is kind of anchored to that quite nicely. And then these little pop-ups there, targets are rooted in space for a nice little kind of quick snackable game that's there. It makes me think of like some type of cereal brand for some reason. I don't know, like if this was not Cocoa Puffs, but one of those. Next one, please. Fantastic Pelastics. This is one that I got to experience. Attended. This was in Vienna, so we attended Vienna for AWE Europe last year, and it was a nice surprise because I didn't know this VPS experience existed. And then some of the guest developers, they said, "Hey, here's some tickets. Come check out our experience." This one's eighth wall driven. Inside is it's kind of like you don't see a picture of it here, but if you look at the Belvedere Museum of Vienna, it is a pretty stunning like museum location with this like long garden that runs out the backside of it. As part of the ticketed experience, this group, Orb Amsterdam, they partnered up with the museum to kind of make an extended engagement experience with your ticket. So there's a little upsell add-on to the ticket price, and then with that, you get this QR code where you download or you're able to then like scan in, and then at those locations, you see this little Sphinx right here. Right next to the Sphinx, there's an actual statue of the Sphinx. And then this is more of an educational piece about learning like animals and what they eat as part of the museum experience there. It was really charming, probably like a 25-minute like walkabout experience. I think there was like 8 stations connected to it, 6 or 8 stations attached to this one. And it was really free form. You could go from whichever location you wanted to whichever location. So it was nice kind of you could independently navigate that one on your own. That one felt good. Next one, please. Cool. The Coors Light California Bear, and then press play. I don't know why I read that as California beer. I think as I watched the video, it makes me think like, oh yeah, this guy's definitely got some brewskis here. There he is. I like this one for a few reasons. This one is like a brand activation and it's very short form and it's very on brand. But having kind of a grill out there, it reminds me, I think for this challenge, like a lot of you might not be near public VPS locations, but guaranteed you have a space around you, even in your own like office room or living room space that you can use for kind of like your private testing. And this was nice because this one didn't require a public location, but just like, yep, there's the grill, it's in the back, and here's the bear that's going with that. So I wonder too if they would have partnered with that specific grill company. Anyone that owned the grill could have also like possibly scanned that or been used if that was a VPS location. All right, next one. Next one, Pablo. Thank you. All right, this one was a little dark and I wasn't sure if I'd include it, but I did. It's called Hell Sovereign. And I like this one because it was meant to show kind of a Halloween use case. A very popular kind of like public statue there. And then they do the flash of light and then boof, they kind of make it gothic with this kind of scary dressing on top of the model. This one I wanted to show because it used how closely VPS can actually interact with a monument itself. You get, as Tori mentioned, that kind of like centimeter accuracy. So they put like a set dressing right on top of it. Play it one more time, Pablo, that video, and watch just like the model right there. Watch the dress and the skirting around it. And then suddenly it's kind of much larger or a little bit like overgrown look. And you see those crows on the head, and then it's like tap on the crow. The crows were meant to be like exclusive. Only a few of these would pop up per day. And then with those, you would get kind of an exclusive discount for like Halloween themed things with a local retail partner that they're working with. All right. I think that was the last one of those sample slides. Is that right, Pablo? Very good.
That is correct. Thank you so much for walking us through that. Yeah, a lot of great examples of what can be done with VPS there. And before we move on to the challenge information, I wanted to quickly just also show you all some of the past submissions for challenges that have used VPS that were deemed successful. So hopefully we can push a little bit of ideation and a little bit more creativity here while we're here. So the first one was the winner of the Lightship Real World AR Challenge, which is, I've been hired by alien researchers, which is a really great VPS experience that essentially is a educational experience that focuses on language. And so it's a really cool way to incorporate learning into VPS. I'm just gonna let the video play through here so that you all can see exactly what the experience does. So you can see the use of maps And then they added some vocab games at each of these locations. So really great experience. If you haven't checked it out, it is in the blog announcing the winners for the Real World AR Challenge that was happening last year. Next up, we have as well another Lightship experience. This one is AR Bird Safari from Irina, who submitted this for, again, the Real World AR Challenge. This was really cool because it essentially is a live bird watching app experience. So it helps you identify various bird species, and as you discover those bird species, you can add them to your library, essentially kind of additionally growing your knowledge base. Similar in many sense to Monster Hunter now, where as you encounter new monsters, you get all of the information about them. So really great, cool experience here as well. Also kind of leaning in on the educational side of things. And then for Eighth Wall, last year's VPS challenge lended some really cool experiences. The first being our grand prize winner named Reimagine Reality, which was a combination of VPS and image generation. So Matthew here created a experience that using a couple of different public waste spots, and you can create a new version of that waste spot by editing the mesh. So you'll see a couple of here examples of this kind of like bench turns into what almost looks like the St. Peter's Basilica, which is really cool. Or you can turn it into a yummy snack. You can see this experience. I think, yeah, this experience, it's a bench, but it turns into a cake or a big building. So a really cool experience, kind of messing with AI image creation and the mesh provided by the waste spot. And then lastly, we had Magic View, which is more of a tourism focused experience built by Libardo and Diego using Eighth Wall. And if I'm not mistaken, they continue to build this beyond the challenge to kind of further promote tourism in this area. So essentially what this is you go to various different locations in the city and you collect postcards. This is their video where they were learning how to use VPS from Evan in one of the many tutorials available. And you collect these postcards to learn and hear about the different histories, all of these different statues and locations. So it was really great. You can see that it's a little plane that's walking around in the map during this. So yeah, also a really cool experience. All righty. And now let's jump into the challenge information. So yeah, as we've mentioned, this is a collaboration challenge for Eighth Wall and Lightship developers. Yes, we are huge fans of Diego Mela. And for this challenge, unlike last year's VPS challenge, you will have a little more than a month to develop. So one of the biggest points of feedback that we received is a month to develop in VPS can be really difficult, especially when you're considering the fact that you're activating new locations and many times have to go out and rescan if your first scans weren't all that great. So with that in mind, we decided to make this a little bit longer. And to support that, we have 3 key events, the first being today with our info and ideation session, and then 2 coming up. So next week, we will be hosting Niantic AR Workshop, where we will be essentially splitting up into 2. We'll have an introductory to building with VPS with Braxton and Evan Carlson. And then we'll split into 2 workshops. One will be Lightship and one will be Eighth Wall, and both will be recorded. So if you only want to attend one or the other, but want to hear both sides and experiment with both sides, you can definitely go back and rewatch. And then lastly, apologies for the date there. It's not February 20th, it's May 21st. We will have AR Voices, and that will be hosted with Kinfolk, who will be the Kinfolk team, who will be bringing on a variety of different engineers that worked on different aspects of the app for you all. So let's get into some of the fun stuff. So for the grand prize, we will have a Eighth Wall and ARDK grand prize, both each at $2,500. And this grand prize will be the best overall experience using VPS and keeping in mind the judging criteria for the challenge. Additionally to this grand prize, we will have very specific prizes that almost kind of bring in their own judging criteria, right? So on top of the 4 judging criteria that we will go over in just a second, each of these prizes have their own little element to consider. The first prize is the Global Explorer, which is simply aimed at enriching our view of the world through immersive storytelling. So think about maybe like the tourism experience that we saw a second ago with Magic View. And because we're nearing the Olympics and summer, we decided to throw in some fun with sport and fitness. So the champion of fitness sport will go to the best simulations of outdoor activities. And then the community catalyst is really aimed at trying to see if you all are able and willing to take on the dive of creating a shared AR experience with VPS, like Joe shared a second ago. So the Community Catalyst Prize will go to those who can turn public spaces into hubs of social interaction. And then lastly, the Nature Navigator Prize is the best use of AR for environmental exploration and education. So similar to kind of like that bird watching experience or even the language learning experience. All right, so the 4 main criteria to focus on. First is your overall use of VPS. How effectively did you use that? And what we mean by that is, are you simply using a location and then adding an AR element to it? Or are you going beyond and using the mesh created by the scanning? So to make sure to keep that in mind when thinking about your experiences. Innovation, essentially what this is meaning is, are you going above and beyond VPS? Are you adding other elements to your experience? Things like shared AR, things like world effects, sky effects, etc. And then the last 2 are a little bit more generic and obvious. The first being Niantic's mission. Does it encourage the use of users to explore the world together? And as Tori and both Joe have mentioned already, that is a huge part of why our mission and why we kind of encourage the use of maps and VPS. And then lastly, the completeness level. Because you only have 2 months to build this, we will take into consideration that element as well. But essentially, this question is, is this a demo? Is this a prototype? Or is this more of a full-fledged experience? That'll be added into the criteria as well. For submitting, so for those of you that are submitting for 8th Wall, you will need to submit a 60-second demo video and a public playable featured project page. For if you do not know how that works, you can check out the 8th Wall documentation, and it walks through exactly how to make a public playable experience. On the Lightship side, you will have to submit a 60-second demo plus any additional a zip file with your code base for testing and just double checking the experience on that. And as mentioned, all final projects must use VPS. And I think we had a question from Joe in the comments regarding if you can use private scans and locations. Yes, you can. But given into consideration the prizes and all of the different judging criteria, I would strongly advise not going that route. But if you do have to, that's totally fine. I think last year in the 8th Wall VPS challenge, we had 2 people win prizes with private scans. So it's definitely not going to automatically disqualify you, but just something to consider.
And can I add a quick detail to that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love this question because I think there's a definite like relationship between private and public that is important for development. That we provided a lot of tooling to just make it convenient. It takes time to like get out on site to be working, on location. So I recommend finding kind of the best of both worlds, where you're using private VPS locations that you set up yourself for like your rapid, quick iteration and like testing process. But then for the final submission, as Pablo mentioned, we want this to try to be like socially acceptable or accessible and used. And so for that, like also try to think about it through the lens of like, how about someone else? Where is there interesting foot traffic? What kind of locations does this experience kind of make sense? That's not my backyard. And like, I think that will kind of maximize the impact, of your submission this way. And also minimize kind of the time requirements of logistics and going back and forth.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm muted. No, I'm not. Thank you for that. And for those of you that are not already on the actual submission site, it's ape.io/challenges, or I also dropped a link in the chat a second ago. but I can drop it here now. And then this is a great place to sign up because we will be sending emails through that, but we will also be communicating to you all through 2 other channels. For 8th Wall developers that are familiar with our Slack, you will receive messages in the challenges channel and in the announcements channel that are important to this challenge for the next few weeks here. And then for the Lightship side, we actually have a Discord forum channel called Challenges. And in there, you can create new posts that automatically create kind of like a thread. Make sure that you read the post guidelines scheduled here before you get into posting. But this is also a great place for you all to communicate and to also start team forming for everyone. And yeah, that concludes our information slides. We will now go into Q&A. I know that there was a lot of questions in the Q&A and a lot of them were answered, but I'd love to kind of talk through those here for a second. But actually, I'm looking at the time and we are really close to 12 p.m. So we'll do it really quickly. ARVR guy asked a question, can each participant submit 3 submissions? Yes, so it's a max number of 3 submissions. So you can submit up to 3 submissions, and then each team, if you were to make a team, has a max number of 4 members per team. So this has been asked before, can you be part of different teams? And by being part of different teams, can you submit more than 3 submissions? Yes, technically you can. If you want to form more than one team and they're all different members, you're more than welcome to do that as well. But just keep in mind that you are essentially putting a lot of work onto yourselves for that. But would love to see the more the merrier as far as experiences go. Alrighty, let's see. We had some good questions by Kyle. I see a couple of those were answered there already. I see is there a question regarding the Wayfair app? Yeah, Joe, you're gonna check on that. Thank you, appreciate it. Awesome. Okay, cool. In the interest of time, because we're really close to 12 p.m. and I want to get into this ideation session, I'm going to go ahead and allow for those questions to continue to be answered in the chat and in the Q&A. We have a question from Maura. It's me living in a very rural area. Could I build an experience for a waste spot very close to me and then build the same experience again for a waste spot close to the judges for testing purposes? Yeah, so that is a great question. For testing purposes, we probably, because the judges are in many cases not going to be anywhere near you, for those of you that are joining from like India and Sweden, we're going to be very reliant and dependent on your video for the submission and then your public featured submission. So by submitting that, we can double check all of the elements to make sure that you are using VPS on that front. And for the Lightship side, submitting your code. Yeah, thank you so much for joining, Philippe. And yeah, no worries if you got to get going. So with the last remaining 8 minutes, let's jump into this Google Jamboard that is open for everyone. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And here we are going to start kind of like the ideation process, but more importantly, an element of team forming. So if you all can click on that link, you should be able to join in. To grab a sticky note, it's this icon here on the left-hand side, and then you just type in some info and you can change the color as needed and then hit save and that new sticky note will appear. So if you all want to test that, say hello for a second. Yep, I see you all are creating duplicates. That's another way to go. Hello world, awesome. I'm gonna give it a second to make sure everyone's able to grab these sticky notes. Yeah, so you can hit this sticky note option. If you're on Mac, Command-Shift-P also opens it up. You can also right click on any of these, duplicate it, drag it, and then edit it. There you go, cool. Alrighty, awesome. So let's move on to page 2. So for those of you looking at the screen share and also have it, you can hit the icon next frame in the top. And here we can would love to hear like a quick summary of where everyone's minds are. If you already have an idea, drop it in here and would love to see where everyone's thinking as far as their experiences that they're planning to submit for this challenge. And apologies if my voice is sounding a little bad as we go through this. Major seasonal allergies here in LA. Is the software needed publicly available? Hey Tom, yes. So both Eighth Wall and Lightship are publicly available. For the Wayfair app, you do need to download TestFlight and essentially kind of become a beta tester for the app. But that is also very easily available to download, and the instructions are in that link.
Hey, Pablo, real quick. There's a question from Kyle here, and I just wanted some quick clarity. I'm not sure if the question was cut off at the beginning. It says something the inside of public buildings, say bars, restaurants, we scanned. I'm not sure if Kyle's still on the call, but wanted to just triple check on that one.
Oh, he just said sorry.
Is Kyle still here?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Kyle, do you want to ask that one
Sorry.
again? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I noticed after I posted it, I was like, what does that mean? So say I want to go into a bar and I want to, scan it so that I can create a contiguous VPS scan and have, say I want to decorate the bar with something from Halloween. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, VPS, I'd say like for best results, outdoor is kind of like the intended use case for most VPS, but I've used it indoors on a few instances, and it can actually be quite well because usually there's kind of controlled lighting that's pretty consistent like throughout the day, and that can be helpful. The challenge with indoor locations you'll find is people, and things change a lot indoors, and so sometimes kind of that can bring down your localizability score a little bit. Like if you're in a bar, the chairs and tables might shift and change from day to day. And so there are some kind of unique challenges with indoor locations also.
But say if I just scan
yeah.
the walls that we know, they're decorated, they're not going to change.
Yeah.
So even if chairs or people get in front of the walls, it'll at least be able to kind of identify that as a VPS.
Unique locations. Tori, go ahead. You got,
I was going to say, like, yes, you can absolutely do that. The thing to keep in mind with indoor locations is if you're creating it as a public location, you need to be just mindful that that location, if it's in a bar, it's not a public space, so it does belong to someone. So certainly you wouldn't want to build something that is going to send a bunch of people into the bar that are going to be disruptive, but like that's kind of their prerogative. So just like think about that. It's totally fine to do indoor locations. But the intent, if you're creating a public location for AR experiences, is it should not be sketchy or uncomfortable for your users to go to that location. I don't see any issue with a bar, but if I'm the owner of the bar, I'm definitely going to be asking people like, hey, what are you doing in my bar? And if
it would be a co-pro in whatever I'm doing. So
yeah, so it's totally fine. Yeah.
Thanks.
One other element to that, Kyle, is that by default, that location may not be approved. So make sure you let us know.
No, it will be. Sorry, we fixed that.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So basically the location needs to be safe and it should be publicly accessible. So like what is not okay is if you try to create a public location that is like inside of someone's private residence. But if it's a location like a bar where like the doors are unlocked during the day and people are fine to go in, like that's fine. Apologies, like some of our documentation is still getting updated, but in general, like public safe locations are fine. We're just going to make that a lot more clear going forward.
All right. Awesome. And you could add requesting paperwork from the owner or whatever if necessary.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Tori, for clearing that up. We had that question come up during our coffee chat 2 weeks ago. All right. So yeah, I see 2 ideas. A little bummed out by that. People, y'all don't have ideas yet. That's totally fine. I see there's a lot of questions though. So why don't we skip the ideation for now and address some of these questions. So thank you, Joe, for providing that Google Play link for Android. I see a question from Aikil. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. I don't know if this question has been asked before, but can we drop custom scanned objects at locations without scanning the location on the Wayfair app? The reason I ask is as a 3D scanning professional in the AEC industry, I find it cumbersome to have to scan the location at 3 different time slots when a single scan would normally get all the textures right. Tori, do you want to take that question?
I think Tori's got a drop. I can.
No, it's fine. I can take a swing at it. If there's some reason why you can't scan the location at more than one time, then we can try to help you out. The challenge we have is it is very expensive to build maps of locations. And when we don't have that requirement, we get a lot of requests to try to activate a location after one scan, and then it doesn't work really well. So the developer will add one more scan and then try again. And I don't want to get into like how expensive that is, but it's extremely expensive. So we really want to do it once and do it well, which is why we have those higher requirements. If there's a reason why you can only visit a location once, then we can try to help you. But like these guidelines are in place, so we can give a level playing field and make sure that there's a minimum level of quality for all the locations that get added to our map. As I mentioned earlier, we're doing our best to make this easier and more intuitive. And these requirements will never get more stringent than they are now. But there are still some pretty hard and fast rules about the minimum level of scanning fidelity before we activate a new location.
And I'll add one note to that too. What I've seen a couple teams do, and to second Tori's statement that like not everybody has that really great kind of scanning equipment, and so our pipeline is primarily made for those with like mobile devices that are scanning, not the heavy duty LiDAR scanning devices that are just really fantastic. And so what I've seen is kind of the best of both worlds approach is that like you create one single VPS location using kind of the Wayfair app, and then because you already have a nice detailed scan of say an extended like area around that, maybe it's like really large field scan that you have, you can use it as kind of like a set extension. So that because you have both meshes of the VPS location and like the highly detailed scan mesh that you already have from like some other device, you can bring those both in engine, and you can orient those in such a way that it kind of becomes an extended portion of like your VPS area, your playable surface. That way, it's localizable. When you're using the coverage API and when you're using like VPS on app, but then you also have a larger playing field for experience. That method works well for like larger experiences. I understand though the time constraints on like creating the scans, but hopefully that provides some alternative thinking on ways to approach it.
Just a question, Joe. Does that mean that if we have a Leica, we can import those scans?
No, not that. I mean, we don't ingest like outside scans that way. What I'm saying is that you can export that directly, say into Unity, your scan, and then you can fuse that mesh, or orient and line up that secondary mesh with the VPS mesh that you do have. In essence, extending your VPS mesh that way.
Is one other question?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any plan to create what would be an anchor point? A lot of these scans we're doing from multiple sides, things like that. And you answered in the questions, my issue was some float. But in terms of being able to identify a specific anchor point within that full scan, knowing that that's where the majority of the viewers would be located?
Maybe that's a good question, man. We'll have to follow up on that one. Mostly because I don't know. I've just viewed so many users at VPS locations, and they rarely approach it from the same exact direction. They rarely stand in the same location when trying to localize. There's kind of like an ideal place for most of these things, but those are rarely communicated to the end user. And so there's just so much variability, in like where they try to activate it from. So ask that one in the forums and on the Discord too, because I think that we should know about it, if that's a specific use case that you're running into for sure.